I say this quietly, but obviously I'm in the business to sell, but I'll tell a lot of places like, hey, your room will fit 50 games. Let's start with 44.
Hi, I'm Russ, and this is the Memory Makers Podcast, the show that helps you create amazing customer experiences and make more memories. And today I am joined by Mr. Adam Kleinhenz from Shaffer Distributing. What's up,
going
brother?
on, Russ? How are you, man?
I'm always better when I see you, good sir. How have you been?
Oh, geez, I don't know about that.
Well, I feel like I've been getting a good consistent dose in between trade shows and things because we're getting ready to ramp up for Cine Show that's coming up in a little bit and working on that panel and having way too much fun, and that's going to be fantastic. But super excited for us to be able to dive in because, one, you come with some pretty fabulous bona fides, and we can talk a little bit more in detail on all things within the arcade and where are some missed opportunities, how people can elevate what the experience is, reduce friction, all kinds of things. Yep. So before we get into those pieces, I would love for folks to hear a little bit about your background, how you came to be involved in this crazy industry, and what kind of trouble you help folks get out of.
Or what I help them get into, actually.
Either or.
I started out when I was 14 years old as a busboy outside of Cleveland where I grew up, and just loved the restaurant business. Went to college in Mercyhurst in Erie, Pennsylvania. Got a 4-year degree in hospitality management, which basically says I got a certificate that says you know what to talk about. So from there, I just got into the restaurant business, and I loved it. I could have gone into the hotel side, but loved the restaurant. And I did that for many, many years. And then my paths crossed with somebody I used to work with that worked for a company called Sega GameWorks, very similar to a Dave & Buster's. And at that time, I was living in Seattle, Washington, and I was from the Midwest. And he's like, hey, they've got an opportunity back in Ohio if you want to go. Made contacts with them and really loved it because that was my first opportunity to go from food and beverage to now going to video games. And so now you create that length of stay. And I was just like, oh, okay. So people go to a restaurant, they sit, they eat, and they leave in 45 minutes. Well, now they're going to a place where they're sitting, they're eating, they're drinking, they're watching the games, the kids are playing. It kind of becomes a playground for everybody. And then from that, an opportunity opened up with a management company. I worked for them for 16 years. Managing large FECs, anywhere from a 3,000 square foot barbecue joint to 110,000 square foot 80-lane bowling alley outside of Orlando. So you name it, I did it, managed all the people, just absolutely loved it. And then selfishly, life treats you well, and you have kids. And I was on the road for many, 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 many weeks in a row, and I wasn't seeing anybody. So made the shift about 5.5 years ago to go into the game side of it, and that's where I am today with Shaffer Distributing.
I love it. So you have got your 10,000 hours and then some in as far as seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, as well as now that much time in those types of venues. Has it helped or hurt your faith in humanity?
It's helped, and it's helped, but it's also hurt. I mean, I've seen a lot of struggles. I mean, I could tell a horror story about an opportunity that I worked at that if they did it right, we would still be in business. But the higher ups got greedy. But what I really loved was just meeting all the different pockets of people. And, I love Facebook because it's actually helped me still connect with some of them that I used to work with and just value their relationships and their friendships. And, now you're seeing the people that were my servers getting married and having kids and just that length and how that is. But, I really was very fortunate to meet an awesome group of people. The people I work with were awesome. And so it just really, makes me love that business even more. And you miss it at times. I can tell you my family doesn't like to go with me out because I'll sit there and be like, oh, well, they didn't greet us in time, or this was dirty, or this is taking too long. They're like, Dad, stop.
Yeah, it's hard when you see the Matrix and then you go out to do that stuff. Tiff and Rinker now get frustrated with me because, even when we go to a children's museum, I'm like, I wonder if they sandblasted this. I'm trying to look around behind on different things, and it's just, they gently pull me back into being present and not commentating and breaking down game film.
We did that this weekend. My wife and daughter went to Nashville to visit her sister. So my son and I'm like, what do you want to do, buddy? He's like, boys weekend, let's go play video games. I'm like, all right. So, we went to 4 different arcades in the Columbus area this weekend because that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
We got 9 holes of golf in, but it was funny because he went in, and then I was watching him gravitate to the games where I'm like, I don't know about that game, and all of a sudden he goes right to that game and he plays it, and so I'm watching this 10 and a half year old go through an arcade that is just like, I'm watching it in his eyes. And so I actually came back to the office today and I was like, this placement of this game wasn't right. Now one of them was a Dave and Buster's, and we don't handle Dave and Buster's. Those are a bigger account, but there's 2 of them in the Columbus market. We went to both of them, and it just made me sit there and think of like, how do I lay out a room, or what do you do here, or one of them, they actually had somebody walking around cleaning stuff, and I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive on a Saturday afternoon. So it was really neat to just kind of take the filter off for a minute and say, okay, what am I doing right or wrong? But then I'm also watching this as my son Gavin's walking around playing these games, and where he's going and what his eyes are. And then we went to the redemption room, and that's just the longest part of a family entertainment center's family trying to leave is going to the redemption area.
Getting through there. Well, they need to talk to and go back and watch the Mike Tipton episode we did with Redemption Plus on that one for sure. But yeah,
absolutely,
double tax write-off for Gavin. 1, just being a kid, but 2, then being able to go and do a little R&D. But it is so nice, and I'm really starting to enjoy that. Rinker's only 3, but as he's starting to get a little bit older with that, and we're going and doing stuff, it does help open your eyes, and you're looking at it. It puts you in the shoes of those kids and being able to see just some of those natural behaviors. And we go and see sites all over the country and have a crazy schedule. But when you're able to go and do it in that type of an environment where you're getting much more kind of direct, unsolicited feedback from Gavin as what he liked about it, what he didn't, and challenging certain expectations or mindsets that we may have about things, it's nice to learn the black and the white by living in the gray a little bit more there.
Absolutely. And then one of them were our customers, and there was a couple of games that were down. So I emailed the sales rep this morning. I was like, hey, I had a great experience. I just want to let you know the monitor on VR Rabbits overhead was out. Is there something like, we're local, well, can we help you in any way? And just little things like that, but really being able to see this whole, seeing this from a kid's eyes, and then also watching the people that were there and what they were doing and what games they were playing. So, sometimes they always say step out of the forest, so like I did that. I stepped out of the forest this weekend. Just an awesome experience to be able to do something like that.
We're really lucky to get to do what we do, and get to still be grounded in a lot of fun, doing the business that we do, which is awesome. So
absolutely.
Love that. Thank you. So let's take a look at, with all of the experience that you've had and being able to see, what's setting people up for success and what's something that is a common, missed area that folks can always tune up and have operate a little bit higher to reduce friction. As we were preparing for this and kind of going over what are some of those kind of core elements, you had outlined a few things that I want us to jump into. One was preventative maintenance, the ability to reinvest into the game room to keep it fresh. What are some of the daily duties and things that we need to do so that way you can capture and keep the small things small and have a faster turnaround time, as well as looking at what the reports are. So when we're spreadsheeting and we're diving into all of this, what is this actually telling us? So starting with the preventative maintenance aspect and similar to your, Rabbit story where you saw a monitor out, what are some of the things that you see that customers that they're easily missed opportunities that aren't a heavy lift that go into being preventative and proactive with the maintenance of your games?
Yes, and this is like the biggest thing for an arcade is preventive maintenance. So if you take, let's just say your arcade has 30 games, and if you take those 30 games and you take, out of those 30 games for 3 months, I'm going to take 10 games a month. If I take the 10 games a month, then I'm going to take those and divide it by the weeks. You're looking at preventively maintaining 2 to 3 games a week. And what does that mean? You're going into the game. You're playing the game. Does the start button work? Does the driver wheel work? What does the compressor look like? The dust is one of the most important things to get away from a game. Mm-hmm. And the reason why you want to do that is you want to make sure that the dust is not settled in. So you blow it out, you vacuum it out. But you also want to move the game, see what's underneath the game. You're going to probably find about 5 air hockey pucks that you probably lost at some point. But really the preventive maintenance piece of it has to be broken down and it has to be done. You have to hold your team accountable. If you can't hold your team accountable for the preventive maintenance, your game's going to break. And your game's going to break on a Friday, Saturday night where it's 80% of your business. 80% of your business is coming in. You're losing that that mark. So really and truly, if you just break it down to what you have, and then you preventively maintenance that game every quarter. So you're going to do it January, you do it in April, so on and so forth as the year goes. And so really just breaking it down game by game. We have a list of things to do to a game. We're happy to share that with anybody if they want to reach out to us and just say, what do I have to look at? But you're looking at all aspects of the game, and it should take about 30 to 45 minutes per game to actually sit there and preventively maintenance it.
I love that. And so, and one, breaking it up so that way it's not, oh my gosh, it's the last 2 weeks of the quarter, we need to do all of the games, because that is not the best way to go about doing it, and just makes it, you're not going to be as thorough on each of the games as you otherwise would, all of those things. So I love the ability to strategically schedule out what those look like. Are there, and to your point, there are some games that you're going to do specific things on, just, hey, if this, with pushers, you're going to have this, with, video arcades or VR elements, you're going to do these kinds of things instead. But making that bite sizable and consistent, so that way everything is getting a healthy look at it, I absolutely love.
Yeah, and the other thing is make sure you're tracking what you're doing. So when your technician is on a game, make sure that you, as the owner, operator, general manager, know exactly what's being done. And if you see the same thing on the same game every quarter, then it might be a problem. We're never going to tell you, hey, you got to buy like 7 compressors and spend that money and put them on the back shelf. We'll tell you to spend the money on your commodities, which is your down the clown balls, your let's bounce ping pong balls, your air hockey, the things that you're going to lose rapidly. We want to make sure that you have a backup of them, but be consistent and do that preventive maintenance on your slowest day. Do it on a Tuesday, do it on a Wednesday. Don't do it on a Friday night, but go in there, have your technician get in at 8 o'clock in the morning. Before you open at 10:30, 11 o'clock, you could have 3 or 4 arcade games already done. That's one of their duties that they have to do for the week.
Are you guys seeing any ratios or high-level metrics that you typically recommend of, hey, if we've got a, arcade environment that has 30 pieces versus 60 pieces versus 80 pieces for new startups, what should they be thinking? Like, is that 2 to 3 guys as you start getting up into 60 to 90 games, just because you're going to be fixing things that are down in real time as well as doing preventative maintenance? What are some labor metrics that you guys typically recommend based on size of arcade, or does it just matter? Is there such a thing?
There's not really a matrix. It also depends on what they have in the facility. So if we're looking at a family entertainment center and we're looking at bowling, laser tag, maybe they've got something they're doing outside, you look at all of those matrix. So if you have one, let's say you're doing a family entertainment center that has arcade, laser tag, obviously the food and beverage, kind of a smaller one, you're looking at a head technician, then you're looking at probably somebody right there next to them. When you've got anywhere between 20 to 40 games, you're probably looking at one technician to be able to help you out. As you start growing in size, then you're going to need 2. You always want to make sure you have a technician on Thursday nights, on Fridays all day and night, Saturdays all day and night, and Sundays all day and night. And then you can back off during the week where you might be able to have that person do a mid shift. They might be able to do a swing shift, something like that. Really and truly, but on those peak days, you have to have somebody, and you have to have them in the arcade walking around, so that if there is a problem, you've got a radio on them. The redemption person can radio to the technician. They walk right over, figure out what the game is. Maybe it's something simple. They get it fixed right away, get it back and up and operational. So making sure that you have somebody on staff during your peak times is also key.
So that ties in well, and we'll circle back around to what does it look like to reinvest or keep the game room current, but daily duties. So when those technicians are on there and you want to have them there on Thursday, there on Friday all day and night, there on Saturday all day and night, and same for Sunday, what are those daily duties during those peak times? If during the slow periods we're trying to do preventative maintenance, but during those peak periods, what are those daily duties that we should really be ensuring that our team is executing consistently?
So you're going to look at your redemption person. So it may not be a technician, but whoever it is, it's just like when you have a prep cook in the kitchen, right? They know what they're prepping because somebody told them, hey, we need to prep this much. We've got this event going on. It's like somebody at a bowling counter. When you walk in at a bowling counter, you have a checklist of things to open and a checklist of things to close. The checklist to open and close an arcade is very simple. And what I mean by that is it's going up to your basketball game, swiping your card, making sure 4 basketballs come down one lane, another 4 in another lane. If not, then you make sure that they're evened out. It's going to the skee balls, the same thing. Going to down the clown, going to any game that has a commodity inside it, go into that game to make sure that you have enough. Because the last thing you want to do is swipe your card on skee ball, 14 skee balls come rolling down, and guess what? My son doesn't have any skee balls because they're all in this one. And those are simple duties. But the other thing is people like to have a clean environment. So in an arcade, make sure you put tables there, because mom and dad may want a beverage. They may want to walk around, and it's rather, have the table hold my beer than instead of the game hold my beer, right?
That's right.
You want to walk around and make sure that it's a clean environment. You have trash cans. If there's a stool in front of any game that is like a coin pusher, should have a stool in front of it, make you feel comfortable, just like Vegas. Think Vegas now, right? You're playing a casino game, you're sitting in a nice, comfortable stool. So we want to make sure that those are the duties that you're doing. But also your redemption person that's opening and closing, your store or counter should be well equipped. And so you want to make sure that your back storage is there, because the last thing you want to do is you get 9,000 tickets and then you can't spend it on anything but gum and little army men, because it's not stocked well. So that's where the redemption companies come in handy to make sure that they're doing those auto reorders. But really and truly, the opening and closing duties are making sure the game's playable. If there is a down game, it's well noted that the game is not working. Make sure all the little things that come in contact with your guests, make sure all of those are done at opening, and make sure those are done at closing. And then on a busy Friday and Saturday night, when you have a mid person, take them off the redemption counter, have them floating around, and maybe they challenge somebody in a game of basketball, and their kids playing because two other kids are playing Cruise and Blast. So go challenge them. It's a fun environment. Have fun doing it.
Well, and is there taking a pass to make sure things like the merchandisers are have enough things that you didn't get cleared out by the day camp that you had in on Wednesday and now it's Thursday and we want to do that. But I love that aspect of gamify it, have fun with the guests as they're going through, because that to me is one of the missed opportunities as well of how are we smiling and bringing the fun to the guests, and is it a game, and maybe that's having a free play card where hey, I just want to be able to challenge you to see that you just played 3 games on the basketball and the Pop-A-Shot. Great, let's do a 4th one and go head to head, or Big Buck Hunter if you're me, because that is my game of choice. Hey, let's go after it, because those touch points are just, one, they're fantastic opportunities to get feedback if there is something else that happens somewhere, but it's also things that not everybody does. And when so many people in our industry say oh, we want to be like Disney, we want to be like Disney. Well, doing it at that scale and all of those things is relatively unattainable, but there's the core framework of being intentional and touching base with your people as they're going through it and having fun with them and making sure that they're doing it. That's a great way to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, and I was in an FEC a while ago, and they were just doing the install, and so I went to the install. I was walking around. I walked into now they have a counter that was here, and right next door was a door, and you go in the door, and they had light switches in their redemption room, and I go, what's that for? Well, me being me, started flipping them. Well, all of a sudden, it was for the games. They put light switches inside the room to turn the games on and off every night. I usually just went up to the breaker and just would power down the breaker and call it a day. And then you get the one breaker that was your cooler that said "Do not touch," right?
Right.
So, but I'm in there, and of course my install guys are like, "What are you doing, Adam?" And I'm like, "Click, click, click, click." I'm like, "I thought it was awesome." And so I take that idea and go back to somebody else and say, "There was this idea. It didn't cost anything more." And they labeled it to what games were on what, so that everybody knew. And then when you mentioned the crane games, I was in another FEC. And usually the Taj Mahal or the big giant crane has those big giant knobby balls, right? Yeah. Well, usually you fill that up, and usually by Saturday afternoon you're pretty cleaned out. Well, what they did was they had a net above the game with the knobby balls that they had already blown up during that week. And so when they needed more knobby balls, all they had to do was just jump up, boom, 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 throw them in the machine and keep on going. So you weren't sitting there trying to do it on a Saturday afternoon. Or somebody they do garbage bags. They fill up the small knobby balls and they put them in garbage bags and put them in the back. So they're ready to go. And, I love walking into places that I've been into to see them from where they're at now to where they're going. And just the little things that they do and the little nuances that you get. Somebody's always going to do it better than you. So might as well take their knowledge and keep running with it.
Absolutely. Well, it's to your point as well, like a prep chef, right? Getting that mise en place, for my fun, fancy French term that will make Danny smile, even though he's not here. But having those things kind of prepped up, using your slow portions of the week of saying, hey, we're looking at the data, we're seeing this is what, we're going through as far as, quantities on the merchandise, all of that stuff. Great. So we can take that kind of running average and have those things done. And, it's that time to lean, time to clean piece, but doing it in a way that is just makes it fun, makes it easy. I feel like in those giant crane pieces as well, like you have a big whole net of those things above the game and everything there too. Like that's an eye draw of like, holy cow, we can, get into that and be able to use it. And it's almost like the same thing of, when you see people using their merchandise as an interior decoration piece, whether they're cool like chandeliers of plush toys over your crane games and things, so that way that that's where you want to go and do those things. It's awesome to see, but it's those little things that then add up and make it easier and primes the pump. So I love that.
Yeah. And I always tell people, you brought up Disney. We just recently went to Universal Studios and just see that, every time you get out of a ride, you're walking through, a store, right? Like my son loves Jurassic Park. So we went through Jurassic Park and we walked through the store. My wife and daughter did the Velocicoaster and they walked through a store. And so you just see things like that are merchandising. You try to take those small little things and just take those back to what you can possibly do in your location.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit about keeping the room fresh. And we can either talk about the reporting side and how do we start to analyze what maybe needs to have some of that and then tie that into the reinvestment of what we should be doing to keep things current. So, as we talk with folks and there are key performance indicators that we want to have an eye on, making sure things like our payout, understanding why certain games are performing better than others. What are some of the things that you encourage folks as they're setting up a game room? Hey, when you get your reports through your cards, reader, here's some of the important daily pieces, here's some of the monthly, here's some of the quarterly things that we need to be looking at. And then what is that data actually telling us that we need to be doing as far as taking action?
Yep. So this is probably my favorite question that I get asked from a lot of people. Then it does go into the reinvestment. So what we do is when we do an install for someone, after 14 days, we take a look. Once they open, 14 days later, we take a look at the reports. We take a look at the reports for two things. One, what is the game paying out? But most importantly, how is the game doing in the room? We kind of have an idea of what games should do what. And then in 60 days, we do another follow-up visit. What that follow-up visit means is, and it's just over the phone, we take a look at the reports. This is where we can actually start to dive in to see what it is. Every Monday, you should get a report, and it should be a 6-week trend report. You're going to get other reports from your game card provider. I can tell you what I would look at as an operator, but obviously with them, you guys can look at whatever. But the 6-week trend report for us is important because it shows us exactly 6 weeks what the game room is doing. So if you see a week where there's a game that's down and it's got $0, well, first thing I can do is call my technician and say, why is X, Y, and Z down? And I look at that game and we can figure out, okay, the part's on order. We got to do this. We got to do that, whatever that is for a general manager or an owner. But the best part about it is it also tells me what my payout is. And so it's important to look at your payout because most places are going to tell you they want about a 20 to 25% payout. You don't want to pay out too much because if you pay out too much, that means you're giving away your house. But if you're paying out too little, that means someone's not making enough. They're probably not going to play that game. And so you see that game usually trend a little bit lower when you actually look at those reports. And so that 6-week trend report by any card company is very, very important to be able to trend what that does. We're happy to look at any reports. We don't share and say, well, Billy Bob's arcade over there on Main Street does this. We'll say like-minded facilities that do this. And we have an idea of what game is going to do what, where it should perform. Well, the other thing that we look at is I also look at what you're charging for a game. So we're in a society right now where cost of living's gone up. Everything's gone up. Well, if you're not increasing your arcade games by 25 cents or your merchandisers because you're putting merchandise in there, you really need to take a look at that. And what I mean is if you get a generic merch of stuffed animal, you may be charging $1 for that stuffed animal. If you get something like a logo, like a Marvel or something like that, you should be charging $1.50 or $1.75. If you're putting your logo on it, you should charge a bit more than a knobby ball that doesn't have your logo on it. And so we look at those on the pricing. So when I look at a report, first thing I do is look at what's the cost per play, where does it rank in your room, and what's your payout on your game going to be. And then from that point, help you determine what we need to do. What do we need to tweak? What do we need to modify? What do we need to change? But also it goes into your reinvestment strategy as well. And so when you look at a reinvestment strategy, what you want to look at is two things. Did I pay that game off? And how is that game doing in my room? And I can tell you anything with tickets is going to be the number one game in your room. Just simple. Everybody's going to tell you that gives out tickets or a ticket ring, it's going to be number one.
Yeah.
But what you want to do is you want to look at your report, and every 6 months you analyze your room. And I usually tell people to try to do it in March, in September. And the reason why I say that is if you do it in March, you got spring break coming up. So when the spring breakers come in, all of a sudden your room looks a little different. Well, then you went through the entire summer. September is a typically slower month in an FEC. Now you look at either a reinvestment or moving around. So in March and September, you do one of two things. You either move your room around in March, and you move all the games around. That means any game that you can possibly move, you're putting it at a different location. I can't tell you how many times you're going to take a game from the back of the room, put it in the front. People are going to think you got a new game. They're like, wow, that's a new game. Never saw it. But it's been in your location for 2 years. Now in September, that's where you look at, I might want to do the reinvestment and actually add into my room. And the rule of thumb is we usually say it's a 10% of what your arcade does. Okay. So take 10% of sales, take 5% of that's going to be trade-in, 5% of that's going to be cash overlay. And then that's what you do. You can move your room around in September and buy games in March, whatever way you want. But we have a lot of locations that will go to IAPA in November, and they'll find some of the games they like, and they'll get them in before March. And then they'll take those games and move them around in September. So that's what I usually say is the reinvestment is usually 10% of what your arcade does in revenue.
So when you're moving those around, and I like that approach of doing it a couple of times a year, because one, you may have something that's not blazing and, it's not a consistent top 10 piece or something like that, but you do move it to a different place. It's got a new sight line. You're going to see an uptick in that, potentially. But some folks get a little hesitant of, hey, this is, Big Bass Wheel is printing money for me. I don't want to touch that, what have you. But being able to look at, okay, we moved this. It was a little bit of a lateral move. It really hasn't moved the needle. We've moved this a couple of times, and so then even when you're looking at your reinvestment, hey, has this been in the bottom 10 consistently for us over the course of a year or two? And now does that make sense? Have we paid that off? Does it now, lend itself for us to trade in? Because you guys will do a great job with just the other, number of clients and locations that you guys are working on of, hey, when you guys first opened, and based on what you thought the demographics were going to be or this or that, like it made sense. But as we're seeing the proof in the pudding and now that we've got a year's worth of data under our belt, this may actually, you may need to beef up. Like you guys are doing an insane amount of video, and you're skewing older. So do we want to take a couple of these things, move them out and bring something else in based on what we're seeing other games that are doing well also?
Yeah. And you'll also hear me now. I say this quietly, but obviously I'm in the business to sell, but I'll tell a lot of places like, hey, your room will fit 50 games. Let's start with 44. Let's figure out what your customers want. Like my 10-year-old and my 12-year-old are going to play different games than what you and your family does. Right. Like, So what does that look like? What's that market that we're going off of? And it's always a feel-good story that all of a sudden in 6 months you say, okay, I'm only going to start with 2 drivers. And all of a sudden you see your drivers are doing really well. Well, okay, let me add 2 more so you can ride 4 at a time. Or maybe you add 2 different ones in. What does that look like? And so that's important to really, I want everything. No, you don't know what your customers want. Like you think you know what they want, but they will tell you something different.
Well, and having that space in to be able to flex that up, but not have money already laid out to it on the front end to feel like now we've got to do a little bit of the shell game or that we need to give it a couple more chances because we took a risk on this as much. Like, I love that idea of give yourself a little bit of breathing room to, as you find out what's really going to resonate with the guests. Now I can bring something in and it's not a zero-sum game out of the gate to be able to do that.
Yeah, and then, we always go to Bowl Expo, we go to Amusement Expo, we go to IAPA. There's going to be opportunities for newer games that are coming out. I mean, they just announced NBA Superstars from Raw Thrills was coming out. They were only supposed to build 200 of them, but the demand on it was so much that now they're building 400 of them. And the game's not even out. It's only at Dave & Buster's. It's not even out, but the demand for this game is already there. Godzilla came out last year, a VR game, and they only put 5 out and they tweaked it. Well, it didn't actually get into production until April or May and didn't start hitting the market at that point. So, there's things that you're going to see at these shows, but, we're very conservative, and I would rather get a game out there, see it going and see how it's doing before I recommend it to a customer, because the last thing I want to do is put something that doesn't have any legs behind it. Sure. And your point about Big Bass was really good. Big Bass is always good. It's a number 1 game. Well, put your game that's not doing so well in that spot. Or like Ticket Ring, for example, is usually going to be the top 3 in your room, and move that game somewhere else and put a game that's not doing well. Is it the game? Is it the location? You really have got to, it goes back to the restaurant business, right?
Yeah.
You're going to run a product mix report and find out that, okay, I put a cheeseburger pizza on my menu and I'm not selling any cheeseburger pizzas. Well, guess what? Your guests want a cheeseburger, not a cheeseburger pizza. So you take it off the menu and you put something on there. That's the way that you have to think about the arcade. That's the way you got to think about redemption. What's not moving? How do you keep it? How do you spice it up a little bit for people?
Yeah. Well, and some of those, to your point, as we were even looking at being intimidated about moving a game because it is doing well, if it is doing that well and it's consistently your number one, no matter where you put it, then now you can use that to a rising tide raises all boats. You're going to get, some more action from your drivers, if you put your Bass wheel next to it, and then it's, okay, well, shoot, now we do need to look at adding a Mario, driver in there or something else like that. That's really cool. So,
yeah, I did a layout for somebody, and I put a set of 4 drivers right by laser tag. And they're like, why are you doing that? I go, well, because mom and dads and sometimes the little kids don't go in there, and you've got the laser tag going on. Well, they're going to sit in this game and they're going to play the game. And guess what? Their drivers are actually one of the higher revenue games in the room because it's right next to a spot where people, and there's a TV, so you can watch laser tag. You can see the mission going on. You can see what's up. You only got one door in, you got one door out. Mom feels comfortable. And now all of a sudden they're playing a game, and the drivers are up there in the top part of the room. It's amazing. Yeah. It's funny to see that. And that place has been around for 7 or 8 years, and we just made some modifications, and their drivers never did well. So it's small little things like that you just track your data with.
Plus, you get to use the wall space of the laser tag area for those drivers instead of trying to put those back to back in the middle of some place, and you're all of that stuff gets a little happier when you're going down that route. So I love it. So as we shift gears a little bit, I'd love to get an idea. One thing, especially when we're bringing on our partners from 360, is and knowing how much education and empowerment and growth we love to have be a part of that event. One thing I always like to ask is what's either the greatest lesson that you've learned, or a favorite book that you've had, or a quote that you've been going through that has been top of mind for you. Any one of those 3 as we're getting ready to gear up for the 360 season here.
Yeah, I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd be doing all of this education, right? Like, you get all this knowledge and it's like, what do you do with it? Well, I've been able to share it. It's the life lessons that you learn. And for me, it's always been do unto others as you want done to yourself. Like, that's just it. Like, everybody's just like, I'm going to treat you with dignity and respect. I hope you do the same with me. I'm pretty even keeled when it comes to things. And so for me, I really look at that because that's the way I've always treated people. And, I would walk into family entertainment centers that we were going to manage that had been around for years. And they're like, we don't want you here. And that was the toughest thing, is to try to do that. And I had a former boss of mine, unfortunately, he's passed away, but he would beat me up every time that he was with me. And he did it to the fact that he wanted me to be the best that I could be. And I'll never forget the time that we were driving to the airport, and he goes, you just want to push me out of the car, don't you? And I go, yeah, kind of. And he goes, if I didn't love you, he goes, I wouldn't treat you this way. He goes, but at the end of the day, I want the best out of you. And that's why I push you. And when I went to his funeral in California, I grabbed his daughter, and his wife was there. And I had met them a few times, but not anything of this. And I told them that story. And of course they, both teared up, but it was the fact that, you've got people in your lives that push you. I know that, the Creative Works talks about their tribe, and you've got the people that can hold you accountable. I think that's important, to be able to have people like that are going to push you because they know they want the best out of you. And if you're willing to take those risks, then that's what you have to do. And, for me, I'm really, I started out early in my life reading the Franklin Covey books, the 1 Minute Manager, the 7 Habits of a Highly Effective People. And that's really stuck with me. And recently I have a little bit longer commute now to work. So I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I've really been inspired by some of the things like Tim Tebow has done and said. If you've not listened to his whole experience with Miami, and then when he went to the Broncos, and that just blows you away when you hear that story. But I like those type of things that could just, you just deep down inside, it's nothing about our business. It's nothing about our industry. It is a mental break for me to take a break and just decompress a little bit.
I love it. Well, and we are excited because 360, obviously, we're going to have you speaking on some, more of what we've been talking about
Yep.
today as far as how do you get the best performance out of there. But one thing that I always appreciate of just who you are as a human being when you're there is, hey, it's very much the same approach that I have of, listen, my advice on $1 is going to get you a Diet Coke every time. All I
Yep.
can do is say, here's what I've seen that works really well. What are you thinking when they, the beautiful thing too is that you see operators coming in there and they're talking about, hey, I really want to try this. And you think in your head, it's like, well, I've never seen that done before. Not that it can't be done, but here's some food for thought that we'd want to think about when we're trying to, do certain things along those lines. And so you have a new influx of people coming together and sharing ideas as well as pushing the envelope, right? Because there are clients that we have where you do try to say, hey, I would err on the side of caution with this a little bit. Nope, this is the vision. I want to do it.
Yep.
And so our job is to help them make as informed and best decisions as they can in those. But there are times where those customers really push us to grow and be better, and we get so much out of that at things like 360. And if you guys are interested in attending Amusement 360, definitely should check out the registration page. We'll put that in the notes for the podcast as well. But Shaffer has a registration code. So if you do Shaffer 24, SHAFFER 24, you can waive that registration fee, deep dive with Adam a little bit more, as well as all of the fabulous speakers that we'll have there. And really looking forward to your talk that you're giving, as well as the panel discussion and your openness and willingness to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of what you've seen out there in the wild through all of your experiences is really great, and we appreciate it so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. We're looking forward to it. I think the panel that we've put together with Delta Strike and Cubica and ourselves and somebody else, it's an informative panel, right? Like, and that's the good part. I mean, we're doing Arcade 101 with, we're doing it for the sake of our customers, of what we see. And I'm not perfect. I'm gonna give you my suggestions. I'm gonna give you my opinions. You can take them. You can give me $1 and go. You don't have to do anything at the end of the day. But what we really like is the fact that you get to meet. We get to meet our industry people and talk to them, because I have questions for them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert in the swipe card system or redemption, but they're there so I can ask them those questions. But most importantly, the operator interviews that you do. Just listening to Andretti's a few years ago and what they had to say. I know High Five is coming back again. I saw that Dennis McIntyre with B&B is going to be there. Like, his story of what they just did down in Texas.
It's incredible.
Mind blowing. And what he's doing per arcade game. I won't share it, but he can share it with you. Ooh. But just that, those are just the little things that I get out of it. And I think I always take a nugget out of every single time I go. We've had customers that have gone, I think they've gone to you guys like 5 years in a row, both of them. And they're coming back again. They're bringing an ops manager with them. So just that information to going from, you're not just an owner operator, but your general managers to ops managers really have the opportunity to learn from a lot of people. It's like drinking from a fire hose. You got to strap in and get ready for it.
That's right. So yeah, I'm absolutely jazzed for those operator interviews that we're going to have. Like you said, we'll have the folks from High Five there. We'll also have Chris Albano from Stars and Strikes talking about, hey, how do you take this stuff and do it across 13 locations, 12 locations without just going, crazy and still protecting your culture. Dennis, to your point from B&B, I mean, just the righteous road path that they've been on as far as growth and the success that they're seeing with their model, and what he's going to be bringing to the table and talking about, hey, here's some non-traditional ways to look at some funding and to get this growth and to do some of these things. It's just going to be a powerhouse of operator speakers alone, let alone the whole lineup. So really excited for that.
I'm excited too.
Well, with that, I think this is a fantastic place for us to wrap up. Adam, I want to thank you so much for your insights, and looking forward to what we've got coming down the pike as well. So we'll continue to have more awesome content coming to all of you that are listening out there, and we appreciate you guys so much. We'll have more with our weekly episodes. If you liked what you heard today, please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Those 5 stars are always appreciated. And if you have any ideas for future episodes, things that you want us to dive down the rabbit hole on, we really look forward to doing that. that. So send us a note on our website and social media. If you have more questions for Adam, be sure to reach out to him and the Shaffer team. And they have just a sterling reputation, and again, honest, and treat you guys the way that you want to be treated, and being forthright and data driven. So love all of that. And big shout out to Mikey Mike on the ones and twos, working the Ultranet for us. And we will catch you on the next one, Troublemakers.